सेव किया था ना?
मैं सिर्फ इसलिए गया था क्योंकि उसने मुझे कॉल किया, that's it. But listen तो.
Save it for someone else.
जिंदगी में सेव करना जरूरी है, मगर जब बात पैसों की हो, सिर्फ सेविंग से काम नहीं चलेगा। इक्विटी म्यूचुअल फंड्स में इन्वेस्ट कीजिए और अपने सेविंग्स को आगे बढ़ने का मौका दीजिए।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
Israel, as you know, is our favorite country, or among our most favorite countries, particularly when it comes to a story, because its politics is so fascinating. In fact, everything about Israel, including its geopolitical location, is so fascinating. Now, Israel has just had its 5th election in 3.5 years. And you know what? Benjamin Netanyahu, the usual suspect, is back. Why do we say usual suspect? Because Israeli politics has been like a revolving door through which the same characters keep going in and out. So last 5 elections have failed to throw up a decisive result. Even this one right now, we are relying on exit polls which tend to be quite accurate in Israel, but it does look like a new coalition will be led by him. Israeli politics is complex, and I will explain it to you in just a bit, whereby it's almost impossible for any one party to get a clear majority. So you have these broken coalitions, sometimes coalitions of people who agree, but more often than not, coalitions of people who not just disagree, but in some cases fully, positively hate each other. But they form a coalition. So this kind of coalitions have come in and out. There was a period when Netanyahu continued on as prime minister, even though he could not win an election, just because someone else could not form a coalition and get a majority. So he continued on. In fact, in that phase, for 3 years, Israel was not even able to pass its budget and carried on with, I presume, with the equivalent of what we call in India a vote on account. We had talked about this in some detail in our episode 280. That's almost 3 years ago when this cycle began. Of that, I'm sharing a link with you. But you know what? When you start listening to that episode also will talk about a succession of elections in the years preceding that. So Israel has had this political instability for a long time. In fact, Israel today would find it an abnormal situation if they had political stability. In this situation now, this new coalition led by Benjamin Netanyahu is coming back. Now, Benjamin Netanyahu is a charismatic figure. He's also a polarizing figure. Now, politics today has many polarizing figures, but he's among the most polarizing in the world because he polarizes not just Israel, but all of the Western world as well, particularly in America, with which Israel's interests are so intrinsically tied. In America right now, there is the government of the Democrats. So Benjamin Netanyahu coming into power, we know very well how bad the relationship between him and Barack Obama was, and Biden was then his deputy. So Netanyahu is now back. And the important thing is the coalition with which he is back, the partners with whom he is back, or the company that he keeps this time is much more right-wing than anybody he had with him in the past. So he is himself a right-wing leader. He is himself a leader of the conservatives. And over time, he's become more and more conservative. Although, mind you, he's been Israel's most westernized or Americanized politician in the last 3 decades, so more than 3 decades. And yet, he's become more conservative, religiously conservative over time. That is what has won him this election again by a very narrow margin, and I will do the numbers for you, but his partners this time. So we also need to understand who his partners are this time. So this time, Israel has this very complicated proportionate representation system, which means you don't vote for a candidate, you don't vote for a constituency. So all of the country, it's like all of the country is one constituency. Everybody votes together and parties contest and people vote for this party or that party. At the end of the day, you count the votes each party has received and on the basis of that, allocate seats to that party. So it's not like Gautam Gambhir is your candidate in West Delhi or Rahul Gandhi is your candidate in Wayanad for the Congress party which wins. It is one party, given the percentage of votes that they win, they are allocated seats. So in this situation, in this through this calculation, Likud party, which is Netanyahu's party, that has got enough percentage. I'm not giving you precise percentage because it's not available. These are just exit polls right now. They project that he will get 30 seats. Now 30 seats and he'll be the largest party. Now 30 seats, largest party, fantastic, but not so fantastic. Because Israeli parliament, the Knesset has 120 seats. So majority mark is 61. The previous coalition, outgoing coalition, barely had 61. Then it fell because one MP, one MK as they say, a member Knesset, didn't like what was going on. So that government fell, triggering a fresh election. That's how they've had 5 elections in 3.5 years. Now, Netanyahu's Likud party has got 30 seats. From where does he get the remaining 31? By the way, his main opposition, which is Yair Lapid's Yesh Atid party, which was leading the current coalition, the ruling coalition, that's got 22 seats. Nevertheless, so Netanyahu has got 30 or 31, depending on which channel's exit polls are you looking at. So there is a channel called CAN, K-A-N, which says 30. Channel called Channel 12, which gives him 31. Nevertheless, he has to get 30 or 31 from his coalition partners. Now, who are his coalition partners? He's got a bunch of really conservative parties. Now, when you say conservative partners, conservative compared to Netanyahu, they have to be very conservative because Netanyahu himself is way to the right of the right. So this is way to the right of the right, right? These are very conservative parties. Some of these represent such conservative forces that they even think that to have the state of Israel, to have human beings create a state of Israel in the 1940s is actually an insult to God, because God said that he himself will come and reconstitute, rebuild the state of Israel. And they think this is an obscenity. That's why it's a very convenient excuse for them with God on their backs not to do their compulsory service in the army, which all young Israelis have to do. But because they say we don't even recognize the state, we don't recognize the flag, what is this state? We don't have to serve in the army. And over time, they've been allowed to get away with it. So in fact, if you want to understand Israeli politics, and you might ask me, what is the binary in Israeli politics? Because any politics has to have a binary, left, right, etc. In Israel, all the politics now is to the right. Labor is very small. Labor, which is the left, is very small. So most of the politics is on the right. It's just a question of how far right of the center you are. In that situation, these are the most right-wing parties. And the one binary that exists is between them and those parties also on the center right who say that, all right, you can be conservative, but you cannot, quote unquote, misuse that conservatism or that religiosity to avoid armed forces service. Because what happens is that if you don't do that armed forces service, while all the other young Israelis are spending those 2 or 3 years serving that period in armed forces, you are going to college. Those guys are denied their time in college. They will have to come back and study. So you get a head start over them. And while they are earning their tiny salaries as young soldiers in the army, young junior soldiers in the army, you might be working in the corporate sector, earning much higher salaries. That way, this community gets a head start over other young people, also extra privileges. And there are many other issues. So these are the religious right-wing parties. One of these groups is the Religious Zionism Alliance. Now, Religious Zionism Alliance has 2 leaders, 2 parties. So one is Bezalel Smotrich and the other is Itamar Ben-Gvir. Itamar Ben-Gvir is a more interesting guy. So I'll mention him first. Also, he might be getting fewer seats than the other one, but these two have an alliance. They are in turn aligned with Netanyahu's Likud. So Itamar Ben-Gvir, who's the most far right of these, he's a disciple of an extremist rabbi whose name you might have read at some time, called Meir Kahane. I don't know whether you pronounce it Meir or Mir, M-E-I-R. Meir Kahane. Meir Kahane had a party called Kash Party, K-A-C-H. Again, I'm not so sure how to pronounce the name of his party, Meir Kahane's party, Rabbi Meir Kahane's party, either Kash Party or Kach Party. That party was banned in Israel as well as America as a terror group. So Itamar Ben-Gvir, his disciple. Itamar Ben-Gvir himself has faced terror-related charges in Israel and the US, and multiple charges. He by the way, now claims that he's got reformed and he does not believe in that kind of terrorism. So he is one of the allies who's got a bunch of seats. And there's another religious party led by a leader called Bezalel Smotrich, who's a lawyer and a right-wing politician. His party is called Religion Zionist Party. Together, the alliance of these two is predicted to get anything between 12 to 15 seats. So let's say 13 seats or 14 seats or thereabouts as it settles down. Then there is another right-wing party, and that right-wing party is called Shas Party. Now the word Shas has a complex origin, but it means party of a certain community. Now, if for me to go into the communities and try to explain to you who are these Sephardic people, etc., that is another cut the clutter, and I have to read up a lot more for that. The reason Israel's politics is so fascinating is that it is so complex. Now, Shas Party is led by a leader called Arya Deri. वो भी उसने भी घाट का पानी पिया है. He's been there, done that. He's also been to jail for 3 years in 99 on corruption charges. Came out, rebuilt his politics, again on the right. And you know what? Once you take a holy dip in any ideological river, left or right, that cleans you of many sins. So he, in partnership with another very strong right-wing party, maybe even more right-wing than his, that is called United Torah Judaism Party. Now, Torah, as you know, is the Jewish holy book. Shas plus United Torah Judaism Party together are predicted to get or projected to get about 17 seats. So say if Netanyahu gets 30, these two get 17, so 10 to Shas, 7 to UTJ, United Torah Judaism, that is 17. So 17 and 30 is 47. I'm taking the lower projection for Netanyahu, not the projection of 31. So 30 and 17, 47, and then if the other alliance, that is the Religious Zionism Alliance of Bezalel Smotrich and Itamar Ben-Gvir, that gets another 14 as is projected, say between 13 and 15, then Netanyahu's alliance gets to that magic figure of 61. So right now the projections are that he comes back to power. And you know, it's a very interesting, it's ironical, but it's also again very interesting situation. Because just yesterday, as results from Brazil came out, there was quite a bit of celebration, say on the left side or on the liberal side globally. Not just in India, these are all global debates, global ideological debates. There was a celebration, oh, thank God. One more strongman of the right is gone. One more strongman of the nationalist right is wrong. This is something that we've said in the past also in our episodes of Cut the Clutter. And I've also written this in National Interest. That you had this very interesting situation in the world where most of the really powerful countries in the world were headed by strongmen of the nationalist right. So you could go clockwise or anti-clockwise. So Donald Trump, Putin, Xi Jinping, Narendra Modi, Erdogan, Netanyahu. In Europe, you got Orban. In Brazil, other continent, Bolsonaro. And when you got bored, you had Duterte in the Philippines. Now, from that situation, there's been a dramatic shift in the world. Many of these strongmen of the nationalist right have lost power. Trump lost power. Bolsonaro has lost power. Boris Johnson lost power. So there was some celebration, say on the left side, that these strongmen are now going and there only one or two remain and they will also go. The Hawa, as they say, is against them and they are being voted out. In that situation now, one of the most prominent of the strongmen has staged a comeback. So that tells you what a complex world we are living in. So you might say, all right, ये सब right wing वाले strongmen, nationalists, सभी जा रहे हैं, but this is more a situation of एक जाता है तो एक आता है. That means one goes, one comes back in. And that is how Netanyahu's return will be seen now globally. Now, a little bit about Israel's politics. Now, Israel's politics, everybody, as I told you, contests. All party goes to the same total voter base. For any party to get any seats in Knesset, it has to get at least 3.25% of the national vote. Now, what happens to those who might not get 1%, who might only get 1%, 2%, 0.5%, 3%, 3.1%, 3.2%, all those who are below 3.25%, all of them waste away. They get nothing. It is the rest who get more than 3.25% who then get the seats. And seats are then allocated proportionately. So I refer back to my episode 280 of Cut The Clutter. That we had done after a result had just come out. And in that result, we saw that Likud had got 25.1% of the vote and thereby 32 seats. Whereas there was a party then which has now gone into decline. It was called Blue and White Party. Blue and white are the colors of the Israeli flag. That was headed by the former Israeli Chief of Staff, General Benny Gantz. That had got 25.95% of the vote and 33 seats. So that is how the system works. It is very complicated. The second thing about Israel is that today's politics, it's very difficult to say who's right and who's left. Because essentially, as I just mentioned to you, everybody is some distance from the center to the right. And that's why these binaries have got very confusing. And that's why, because there is no clear polarization, it's become even tougher for one party to get a decisive mandate. Decisive mandates in Israel are not a majority. But if you get 40, 45, if you could get that much, then it's easier to form a stable coalition. But Israel is not a country known for stable coalitions. Israel is known for a country for a stable foreign policy, for a stable foreign policy, for a stable policy vis-a-vis the Palestinians. All that is there. Israel does not renege on its treaties. For example, Camp David peace accords. All governments have come and gone, but they've honored them. Also, the Abraham Accords, which came about in Donald Trump's last months. All those are being sustained and maintained by everybody. And that's why it is safe to make a presumption that even vis-a-vis the India policy, I'm sure there'll be a lot of excitement now that, oh, Netanyahu comes in, friend of Mr. Modi's. That is correct. Netanyahu is a leader of another kind altogether. But essentially, the Israeli policy towards India did not change even 1 millimeter when he was out of power. And I think that situation will continue even now. Now, I told you just a while back that Netanyahu is as interesting a character as the Israeli society is informal. And I will tell you a story. 1992, I had gone to Israel as a reporter with my photographer colleague Prashant Panjiyar to do a series of stories on how the Middle East had changed 1 year after the Gulf War. The first Gulf War. That's because Prashant and I had covered the first Gulf War. So it also took us to Israel. In Israel, I asked for time for an interview with Benjamin Netanyahu, who was then a Minister of State for Foreign Affairs, a junior minister. But he was a global star. He was a global star not just because he was Israel's most westernized, high-profile politician who spoke fantastic English, but also because he had served as Israel's ambassador at the UN, had written a famous book on terrorism, How the West Can Win, which was quoted particularly by the American right, American Republicans. He was lionized, and also because his brother, Eli, was the commander of the Israeli commando force, which raided Entebbe airport to free hijacked Israeli aircraft and its passengers. In that raid, the only Israeli soldier to die was his brother. So he was a big star already, and this is 30 years back. So he was quite young. We were also quite young. So we asked for time, and we were told the only place he could meet us was at an event, at a function, at a memorial for one of Israel's most lionized heroes, a bit like Israel's Bhagat Singh. So I had a rented car with Prashant. We drove to that memorial. It's someplace in the middle of Jerusalem and Tel Aviv. In Israel, distances are not very much. It's a small country, but it was still some distance. So we waited there. He came late for that event because he had something else going on. And by the time it finished, he didn't have the time to speak with us there because he said he had another event lined up and he couldn't afford to be late for that. So then he said, he took pity on us because he must have seen our fallen faces. So he said, listen, you guys can ride my car and you can interview me in the car. And again, he saw that our faces were still like that, the same hangdog expressions. So he said, bye, don't you want to ride my car and interview me? But I told him that, look, but I have a rented car and I'm driving it. That means I have to leave this car here. Who will come back and how will I come back and pick up this car again? So he said, oh, I trust your driving. If it's okay by you, I will sit in your car. Do you have a tape recorder? I said, yes. So he said, put the tape recorder in the middle. You drive and we can do the interview and you can drive me to the venue of my next event. And that's how that interview took place. So I'm sharing with you pages from India Today archives of that interview, and see the intro to that interview mentions that he decided to ride my car to go to for me to drive to his next event while we talked, and see the last question and answer in that interview. So my last question to him, which wasn't quite a question as much as an observation, I said, we Indians could learn some informality with you. That's because he was riding my car and answering my questions. And he said, you know what? We Israelis could learn to make better tea from you Indians. So see that question and answer as well.